President Donald Trump has put an end to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the federal government. All federal DEI employees were put on paid leave at 5 p.m. Wednesday in accordance with a memo sent from the White House, first obtained by CBS News. The memo also calls for offices to send a complete list of employees impacted and for the cancellation of all DEI-related trainings. The Justice Department is also beginning to enforce some of President Trump's immigration and border security plans. The active Deputy Attorney General has directed employees to step up immigration law enforcement and investigate any state or local officials trying to impede the Trump administration's immigration initiatives. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said President Trump is also ordering military backup.
President Trump signed an executive order of 1,500 additional troops to the United States southern border. This comes off of his day one action, as I just talked about on Fox News, to direct the Department of Defense to make Homeland Security a core mission of the agency. This is something President Trump campaigned on. The American people have been waiting for such a time as this.
CBS News political reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins me now. Olivia, what are the actions on immigration that President Trump is taking, and how is he planning to enforce them?
Yeah, Lindsay, it's good to be with you. The Pentagon is already acting on some of those executive orders that Trump signed within his first few hours in office on Monday. So we're just learning now that about 1,500 active duty troops will be sent to the southern border. We are also hearing from a senior military official just a short while ago that those 1,500 service members will be coming from San Diego and El Paso, and about 1,000 of them are Army personnel and about 500 are Marines. Not only will they be sent to the border, but there will also be these airlift missions that are expected to help the Department of Homeland Security in deporting some of these people that are in custody from Customs and Border Patrol. So that military being used in active deportations and enforcing security at the U.S. southern border. Very, very major news today.
Let's talk about the DEI memorandum. Do we have any sense of the impact that's going to have?
Well, that memorandum went into effect today at 5 p.m. So we know that essentially all federal employees that are part of what they're calling diversity, equity, and inclusion roles within the federal government were placed on leave today by 5 p.m. We're also learning that the White House is asking agencies to submit a written plan for executing a reduction in this workforce regarding all of these employees that are now on leave by next Friday. So deciding what to do with all these people who are on leave, deciding that by next Friday. We don't exactly know the scope of this just yet. There are lawyers in every agency working to determine what a DEI role actually is. Is that someone who works in HR, who perhaps does some work with DEI, or is it someone who specifically focuses on all of this? So I expect in the coming weeks and days, we're going to learn just the scope of how many people are on leave, how many people have been fired, and really the impact of this executive order.
Sure, we'll hear more from you. Olivia Rinaldi, thank you. As we mentioned, many of President Trump's immigration and border plans are being implemented. U.S. border agents have been ordered to deport migrants attempting to enter the U.S. illegally without allowing them to request legal protection. That's according to internal government documents and agency officials. President Trump invoked several executive orders that dramatically overhaul immigration law. They include expedited deportations beyond border areas and the end of birthright citizenship, which guarantees a child born in the U.S. is a citizen, even if their parents weren't. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez has exclusive reporting on all of this for us. Camilo, what else can you tell us about these border agents' new instructions and how it differs from previous policy?
Hi, Lindsay. Soon after taking office, President Trump invoked sweeping powers under the U.S. Constitution and U.S. immigration law to suspend the entry of most asylum seekers and unauthorized migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border, at the U.S.-Canada border, and in coastal sectors like Florida. And that effectively has allowed Customs and Border Protection now to gain the power to quickly and expeditiously deport migrants without hearing their asylum claims. According to internal guidance that we obtained here at CBS News, Border Patrol agents have been directed to swiftly deport these people to Mexico or to their home countries without screening them for asylum or allowing them to have a case in immigration court. And that is a major pivot from longstanding practice, because traditionally the U.S. has been obligated, Lindsay, to hear the cases of people who ask for asylum, because under U.S. and international refugee law, those safety guards are designed to prevent people from being deported to places where they could be persecuted. So this is a major shift that the president is saying is justified because he is arguing in these executive orders, Lindsay, that there is currently an invasion at the U.S.-Mexico border and that unauthorized migrants are posing a public health and national security risk to the nation.
What more can you tell us about these troops who are expected to go to the border soon?
Well, we understand that the active duty soldiers that are being deployed to the U.S.-Mexico border are being sent there to provide operational and logistical assistance to U.S. Customs and Border Protection. That, of course, could include the construction of the border wall, which the president has restarted after the Biden administration halted that multi-billion-dollar construction project by the U.S. federal government. But we also know that currently, under longstanding law, the military, Lindsay, is prevented from engaging in civilian law enforcement, and that includes the enforcement of federal immigration law. So they are not supposed to be detaining, apprehending, or otherwise processing migrants. Importantly, it was also announced today, Lindsay, that the military will be assisting the Department of Homeland Security in deporting at least 5,000 migrants currently detained at the border to their home countries, including Mexico and other nations in the Western Hemisphere. That is a major shift in policy.
What is the president of Mexico saying about this?
Well, the president of Mexico is saying that she will have to work with the new administration to really oversee what has traditionally been a very challenging issue for both countries, the issue of migration. And to be frank, Lindsay, the U.S. has long relied on the Mexican government to really outsource immigration enforcement. The main reason, that illegal border crossings dropped last year was because of Mexican efforts to interdict migrants. And now Mexico will continue to play a major and pivotal role in immigration enforcement under President Trump because they will have to accept migrants who are not accepted by other countries like Venezuela.
Camilo Montoya-Galvez, thank you.
Thank you.